I swear I just saw a polar bear crossing the road up there. What the hell is that? Holy crap! It's a Yeti!
Part 7, baby. Hello and welcome back to the Cryptid Iceberg Deep Dive. Today we're going to be looking at Tier 8 of the Cryptid Iceberg made by thy Cheshire Cat for r/iceberg charts. As usual, please be sure to like and comment down below on this video, subscribe if you haven't already, ring that bell so you never miss an upload. We're growing our audience and I'm having a lot of fun doing this. We are so close to the end of this iceberg. After this, there's only 2 more tiers, so only 2 more videos, but I have a whole plethora of new content coming down the pipeline for you. My next iceberg is prepped, ready to go after this one. I'll probably get back into doing the movie tier list too, so don't worry about that if you were a fan. And as always, thank you once again for watching.
I got a gun under my seat! That's it! Now I'm gonna use it! Shit! I'm hit! Oh no! I wasn't able to retrieve it!
The hot-headed ice borer has got to be the funniest hoax I've seen on this iceberg thus far. The ice borer was first recorded in an April 1995 issue of Discovery magazine. Said to be an abnormally large naked mole rat that lives beneath the ice and permafrost of the Antarctic continent, these ice borers use a superheated portion of their forehead to tunnel through the frost and the ice. They also use this superheated forehead to hunt for their preferred prey of penguins, although it's speculated that they are after Antarctic explorers too. Ooh. This is 100% an April Fool's Day joke because the man who wrote the article, his name is April Pazzo, which is Italian for April Fools. Congratulations. I really do have to give credit where credit is due. Thy Cheshire Cat, a lot of the things I've had to research to make this iceberg have made me laugh harder than anything else in a long time, so thank you for that. This is incredible. From the Zintalava River in South Africa, we have Mamlambo. Mamlambo, also known as the brain sucker, is a 6 to 7 foot long aquatic cryptid that prowls the river and devours anybody unfortunate enough to come its way. Its favorite way of devouring people is to grab them, drag them underwater, rip open their face, and suck their brains out with its conical teeth. Sightings and descriptions of the Mamlambo vary, some people insisting that it is a large predatory fish, not too different from the arapaima of South America, while others insist it is more reptilian, a la a crocodile with a longer snout, or perhaps even a large snake. Although there are people who insist that it's part snake, part horse, but those err on the more egregiously large size of 12-foot long lengths, so who knows. Personally, I think the concept of a large carnivorous fish in an African river is far from being the most impossible thing in the world. In fact, it's quite likely, but I don't know that it airs nearly as bizarrely as a lot of the sightings might indicate. El Cuero is a South American lake monster that, while at first it might seem quite derivative, is actually more frightening than it might lead on. Coming from the glacial Lake Lacar in the Chilean Andes Mountains, El Cuero, also known as the hide or the cowhide, is said to resemble a large tanned piece of leather. And by large, I mean 6 to 7 feet across at the most conservatively small estimates. Some sightings were purported to be 15 feet across even. This cryptid is also entirely carnivorous, attacking people and dragging them beneath the water to devour them. It is so common that children in the area are warned consistently to stay away from the lakeshore, else Hueco Hueco or El Cuero devour them. A large cryptid that launches from the water to grab people on the shoreline is inherently terrifying. It's like an orca whale on hilariously leathered steroids, and a lot of sightings would indicate that it might be similar to a freshwater stingray. Others would say a mata-mata or a large snapping turtle, which is also quite frightening, but I propose a different explanation. This one has gotten very popularized in the cryptozoological community, but there are some who believe that El Cuero is a large freshwater nudibranch, also known as a sea slug. And sea slugs are inherently terrifying. So the idea of one that is at minimum 7 feet long and looks like a cowhide and eats people is just, yeah. Let's get biblical with it for a second. Mushushu, also known as the Sirush, is a draconic cryptid depicted on the Ishtar gates of the city of Babylon. According to Babylonian mythology, Mushushu was a dragon owned by the sun god Marduk, but that's not why we're interested in it. It is also featured in one of the many apocryphal books of Daniel from the Christian Bible, wherein the prophet killed it with a poisoned barley cake, but that is also not why we're interested. No, we are interested because Robert Caldaway, the archaeologist who examined the Babylon Gate in 1902, noted that depictions of the Sirush, or Mushushu, were also alongside lions, leopards, and the aurochs, all of which were animals that the Babylonian civilization would have at least been passingly familiar with. In addition to this, the fact that Mushushu have remained unchanged in its mythology for several hundred years, which is almost uncommon with a lot of mythological creatures, led him to believe it was an actual animal the Babylonians encountered. Because with mythologies, depictions and descriptions will change near constantly. The centaurs, what we have now from Greek mythology, were not always the same back at their origin. However, for as cool as it would be for my namesake to actually have killed a dragon in the real world, I'm gonna cast doubt on this creature ever existing. However, the Felid serpent dragon definitely earns points in my heart for cool factor alone. The Eltanin antenna is a cryptid that absolutely defies you with its mere existence. On August the 29th, 1964, the USNS Eltanin, an Antarctic research vessel, took this photo off the coast of Cape Horn, South Africa. The object depicted was 3,904 meters down, or a little over 12,800 feet. And it quite clearly appears to look like some level of radio antenna. This sparked a mass wave in the ufology community as well as the cryptozoological community, because if this was not in fact an animal of some sort, this had to be some sort of a man-made or at least intelligently made object, right? However, there are a lot of people who have identified it as being a specimen of Cladorhiza concrescens, a large, deep-sea carnivorous sponge. But being this deep down in the water, I'm not surprised that it would exist. The deep ocean has a lot of weird shit. And it also has this hilarious photo. I wonder if it's still there. I don't know if I can say this one. Can I say this one? I can say this one? The Coonigator. I'm not saying it again, but this raccoon-alligator hybrid from Montpelier, Vermont is absolutely ridiculous. Sightings don't have a specific start date on record, but most seem to agree around the mid-1960s. And this has continued consistently up into the 2010s, apparently. It looks like a normal raccoon, however, on closer inspection, it has an alligator's snout. This has led researchers to issue the hilarious and yet true statement that there is no way a reptile and a mammal could crossbreed. In fact, the alligator would be more interested in eating the raccoon than the attempt. This was actually written by Vermont University professors, by the way. This statement was written by actual PhD having professionals. They had to illustrate this to the general public. I don't know what the hell they're seeing, man. It might just be a regular possum. It might just be a regular raccoon, but everyone who sees it insists it's larger than a normal raccoon and has an alligator's face. What do you want me to say? The cow-eating tree is exactly what it says on the tin. As I'm sure at this point we've realized, cryptobotany is an interesting field that runs tandem to cryptozoology, and it also is a realm full of human-eating trees. The cow-eating tree also happens to eat people, so not exclusively cow-eating, comes to us from Padrame, India, although legends in the region of the southern part of the subcontinent have gone back for centuries, purportedly even to the 1st century AD. And literally, it's just stories of a tree that eats cattle. There's a report from 2007 of one that was caught in the act, but local villagers rallied together and beat the tree to death. How do you beat a tree to death? Anyways, the cow was freed, and then they noticed another cow eating plants, so they killed that one too. And this is just a really weird thing to talk about because there's not a lot written about it. At least not a lot written that I could find. The Deweo, also known as the Hexenwolf, is a large bipedal dog-like cryptid said to be covered in a dark fur with a bushy tail and a very muscular, almost lupine build. Reported largely in the West Middleton region of the state of Maryland, has also been noticed in Wolfville, fittingly enough. It was also purportedly cited by German settlers in the region for as long as there has been settlements in Maryland. There's not a whole lot to say about this particular dogman cryptid aside from the fact that, unlike other dogmen, it does not appear to be particularly violent or aggressive towards people. It would much rather save its energy for its arch nemesis, the snallygaster. Oh boy, will we get to the snallygaster. Paleodictian is a trace fossil from marine strata coming from the early Cambrian period. Theories for it run wild, but first let's just break down what it is that we know of. Paleodictian is a recurring fossil that displays a hexagonal or polygonal pattern, oftentimes looking like a skin impression. The dividing honeycombs and the walls within are theorized to be tunnels wherein bacteria were cultivated by some as to yet unknown organism. And the theories for this really do run wild. Usually some sort of an archaeobacteria or a colonial single-celled organism is a common one. Some form of a siphonophore or a sponge is another. Or maybe even a more complex colonial organism akin to the Portuguese man-o-war. But here's the part that gets me. We discovered this in 1850. It's from the Precambrian, except we found it in marine fossils for basically every single geological epoch. From the Cambrian period all the way through to the late Quaternary period, we have found fossils of this, meaning that Paleodictian Whatever is making Paleodictian is still alive. The age of it is what stops us from considering it to be a skin or scale impression like a lot of other similar appearing fossils, so this has to be some level of archaeobacteria, right? That's what gives it this cryptid status, because its origin is hitherto unknown, but it has existed on this earth for 538 million years and likely will continue to. The Bermuda Beast is, I think, the only theoretical cryptid that we have. And I don't mean theoretical in the way that other cryptids existing is theoretical. I mean the Bermuda Beast is entirely a hypothetical concept as to why ships and airplanes and people go missing in the Bermuda Triangle. It's not attributed to any one single cryptid. It's not anything that we have on record from folklore or from sightings or from photographs or for anything. It's literally the thought experiment of what if these disappearances and disasters in the Bermuda Triangle were caused by a giant monster. That's just the laziest cryptid I've ever seen in my life. The Paradixian tree is a thought experiment and mythological plant said to grow in India, first written about in the book Physiologus from the 2nd century AD. Physiologus was a book that became rapidly popular and widespread in Europe in the 9th century, and it is a collection of different fables and myths and different Christian texts that have inspired modern views of the world. The Paradixian tree, quite simply, is a tree whose fruit repels serpents and dragons. In the original story from Physiologus, written much more as a fable or a myth, it is said that doves will shelter in the branches to avoid being pursued or hunted by these dragons. For as long as they stay in this tree among the fruit, the dove will be safe, and once it leaves the branches, it will once again be pursued. As a result, this became a very popular metaphor for the church and Christian salvation. Theories for where this tree comes from are utterly fascinating, and I don't mean from India. That's a claim that's entirely unsubstantiated. I mean for where the idea of the tree itself is from. It seems to be a blend of Pliny the Elder's understanding of ash trees repelling snakes in some instances, as well as a combination of the original tree of life from the book of Genesis. This is one of the few purely literary cryptids that we have, the other one being Mushushu, and that's pretty cool, actually. Literary cryptozoology is something I want to add more into this hobby and this science. That's just so utterly fascinating to humans and how our understanding of the world works. Full disclosure, at first I thought the deep sea abominable snowman was just a meme or a joke entry. You know, the kind of names that you shove in the bottom tiers of an iceberg just to pad it out, make it more of a joke. The random shit that doesn't actually have any basis. But no, this is an actual thing. It was recorded in Charles Berlitz's Without a Trace in the year 1985, and supposedly witnessed by a man named Bruce Mornier. I will read from you the excerpt as I have collected it within my notes. We were south of Great Isaac Light, near the drop-off. I was looking at the bottom while I was being trolled along on a line behind a 30-foot boat built especially for diving and salvage work. I could see a sandy bottom at 35 to 40 feet. I was deep enough to see ahead of the boats, and some sort of round turtle or big fish, about 200 pounds, became visible, and I went lower to get a good look. It turned and looked at a 20-degree angle. It had a monkey's face with its head protruding out in front, a much larger neck than a turtle, 4 or more times the length of a human neck. It rotated its neck like a snake, so it watched me. Its eyes were like those of a human being, but enlarged. It looked like the face of a monkey with specially adapted eyes for underwater vision. When it got a good look at me, it took off, using some form of propulsion that came from underneath. And that's all we have. That's as far as the encounter goes. Zaratan is the world turtle. Oh, okay, it's not exactly the world turtle, but it's the concept of a turtle so large that its back is literally a tropical island. There's sandbars, there's trees, there's plants, there's even animals on its back. Until it disappears beneath the waves, which is pretty bad news bears for anything that happens to be sitting on top, like rowboats. Yeah, apparently there's tall tales of sailors out at sea attempting to shore up on this island for a bit of rest, and then out of nowhere it starts sinking beneath the waves because, surprise, giant turtle this whole time literally just found El Dradimon in the middle of the ocean. But of course, there are theories that this is in fact a real animal, not just myth. A lot of people attribute it to being specimens of Archelon, which was a massive sea turtle from the Cretaceous period. Although there are some people who believe that it is in fact a kraken, like I talked about back in the first video. Or it could be either a whale or a plesiosaur, because that's equally as likely as a giant extinct turtle. The Namibian flying snake is a giant draconic cryptid coming from the Kairos region of Namibia, west of Keetmanshoop. Now, while we do have actual flying snakes today, which is to say we have species of snake that can glide, not fly, the Namibian flying snake is a massive creature, being between 9 and 25 feet long, dark brown with bat-like wing protrusions and a supposed smell of soot constantly around it, it likes to make a habit of attacking livestock and farmers. It was spotted sporadically between the 1940s and the 1970s, the first sighting taking place in 1942, and the most recent taking place in 1978, and we actually do have an artist rendition of the 78 sighting, specifically this one here. Now, it wasn't the witness who made this drawing, it was a farmer who had seen the creature and went to a police sketch artist to make this creature for him, and this is what we got. If you ask me, that looks just like Reptilicus. Basically the same thing. In the year 1903, the town of Van Meter in Iowa was subject to a visitation from a very bizarre creature. Now known as the Van Meter monster, it was reported to have large bat-like or pterosaur-like wings, about 6 feet tall, with a glowing light from the center of its head and a noxious stench that followed it wherever it went. It was sighted numerous times over the course of a week by several reputable members of the town, and while it appeared no more than a nuisance at first, they were worried about the danger it might pose to them at large. It had thus far only been seen at night, leading many to believe it was a nocturnal predator of sorts. And it also seemed almost entirely immune to gunfire, as any shots they fired at it had seemingly no effect. This is quite a common trend with cryptids in general. After a week of visitation from this bizarre creature, the townsfolk got fed up and chased it back to a local coal mine. Inside the mine, they found not one, but 2 of these creatures staring back at them. It was a hail of gunfire from this mob that drove them further into the tunnels, and as of that day, they have not been seen since. The most common explanation we've heard for this cryptid is that it was a hornbill escaped from either a local zoo or a menagerie or some other exotic collection, but that doesn't explain the light on its head, although street lamps are also a very recent invention. It makes for an absolutely fascinating visage, though. Well, it's another dinosaur, but it doesn't come from Africa this time. In the Atacama Desert, between the towns of Iquique and Arica, there is stories of a 6-foot-tall bird-like lizard known as the Arica monster. Reported most commonly as a theropod dinosaur or a large bipedal lizard, it is supposedly 6 feet tall and about 9 feet long from nose to tail. It leaves 3-toed footprints in the sand like a bird and is oftentimes spotted by motorists traveling between the 2 towns. However, a lot of its sightings have not been conducted by solo individuals, they have been conducted by families or multiple different motorists. This does lend a bit more credence to its existence, however, I would like to point out that the Atacama Desert is quite inhospitable. Anything that lives out there is either very highly adapted, very small, or both. So I don't think that there's a large dinosaur out there, nor do I think there's a large lizard out there. Some people have suggested it might be a living forest rockhead terror bird or a chuvasaurid from the late Triassic, or maybe it's Argyrophagus, which is a large, almost kangaroo rat-type mammal from the late Quaternary period of the same region of South America. Although I will say the sightings that purported to be a dog-faced kangaroo are just objectively hilarious. And to round off this tier, we have yet another theropod dinosaur, but this one's special because it involves a Denny's. Let's get right into this. I want it to be known that the Partridge Creek Monster started out as pulp fiction. The original stories from 1903 to 1907 are a collection of fictionalized, serialized stories about giant theropod dinosaurs from the Yukon and Alaska regions of the northwestern North American continent. I would also like to point out that in an absolutely unprecedented display of enlightened prophecy, these were described as being 30-foot-long ceratosaurid dinosaurs with a bizarre feather or fur covering. We'll get back to this. However, outside of these initial reports, we then get stories from the 1920s in the Kamchatka region of Siberia, with multiple unconsolidated reports of different hunting parties coming across packs of, again, furred theropod dinosaurs in the wilderness. These Kamchatka sightings are oftentimes considered to be part of the original pulp novel description, which I would buy. I would absolutely agree that sure, they could be part of the original pulp phenomenon. We can thank Pecos Bill for weird shit like this. But then we get into the absolutely unprecedented part of this. Unprecedented part number 1, the Denny's. On the World Wildlife Fund official websites, in the year 2012, an individual reported a sighting from Fairbanks, Alaska that occurred when he and his family left a Denny's. While they were on the road, they and another motorist were harassed by a 30-foot-long Allosaurid-type dinosaur, described similarly to a Saurophaganax, more so than a ceratosaur. This encounter lasted between 40 minutes to an hour, where it tried to get into the vehicles before moving onwards, apparently trying to find food for 2 of its young that were by its side. Once again, this is a theropod dinosaur described with a weird fur or feathery development. And what do we find in the year 2012? Yutyrannus. Yutyrannus was a species of proceratosaurid dinosaur with feathers. On top of that, we also have reports of feathered tyrannosaurs from the Alaska and Yukon regions of North America, specifically Nanooksaurus. So you're telling me that this story invented in the 1900s, in 1903, somehow correctly predicted feathered theropod dinosaurs from a genus that we know to this day had the potential for feather implementations? Are you insane? Whether this is still part of the same original hoax, I don't think so. If it's a different hoax, maybe. But what an insane coincidence that the hoax from the 1910s got the feathered dinosaur thing right before science had even considered this, before Archaeopteryx had been discovered. And that is just about that for Tier 8 of the Cryptid Iceberg. This tier was definitely some of the most inexplicable entries I've ever seen in my life. This tier also has some of the final entries on this iceberg that I was actually moderately aware of. One thing you learn about going through iceberg charts is that you're testing your own knowledge here, and in this little pseudo-documentary series, I've been testing my knowledge of cryptozoology. I thought I knew cryptids. There are things on here that I had never heard of before. But anyways, thank you once again for watching. Again, make sure to like and comment down below, subscribe if you haven't already, and as always, ring that bell so you never miss an upload from me. I'm getting more frequent with it. I don't know if I'll have another one up before the end of the year. I'll try my best to get it up. It depends on my availability for filming. But as always, thank you all once again for watching. God bless, love you all, and stay safe out there.
Hey, get out of my truck! You gotta be shitting me! I just got carjacked by a friggin' Yeti!